Hey, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about suicide. It's one of those topics that we try to avoid, but it affects each and every one of us, and it's one of society's biggest threats. Now, why am I doing this presentation? I'm doing this presentation because suicide and suicide awareness is very important. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in this country, the United States. It affects each gender. It affects one gender predominantly, but it affects each gender. It affects you no matter where you live, no matter which state you live in. Yes, some states are more suicidal than others, but countrywide, it can be seen as an epidemic. In fact, in 2019, the CDC finally recognized suicide as a public health crisis. It's that serious now. Okay, so let's start off with the suicide prevention hotline before we even begin, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text TALK to 741-741. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the United States. They're committed to improving crisis centers and advancing suicide prevention by empowering individuals, advancing professional best practices, and building awareness. So that's one of the things I'm looking to do with this presentation is build awareness, build suicidal literacy, because I think that there's a very important topic that is not being discussed when it comes to suicide, and I think it needs to be discussed. By the end of this presentation, I'm going to give my own opinions. Everything that I say in this presentation is going to be a fact, except for at the end where I give my opinion on how we actually practically fix the issues. So here's how this presentation is going to go. We just did the introduction. I'm going to go over some suicide statistics, gender-based suicide statistics, military demographics to get into less of a homogenous group, because we have to recognize the uniqueness of certain situations, such as a military demographic where you're deploying and you have that cohesion, and once you get off deployment, you lose that unit cohesion, which leads to suicidal ideation, because suicidal ideation is one of the biggest contributors to it is isolation. Okay, so we're gonna touch on that. We're gonna touch on relationships. We're gonna touch on the studies that I had to go through in order to make this presentation. And we're gonna talk about some uncomfortable truths when it comes to suicide. And it might not be what you think. So I want you to stay tuned. I need you to watch this entire presentation, because if you go to one part of it without seeing the entire part, you could take something completely out of context, even though throughout the entire presentation, I'm building a case. It's similar to reading a research paper. I am building the case for my hypothesis. And then we're going to talk about the money involved in suicide, such as how much suicide costs the United States every year and what we can do about it so that we can actually save the US money every year. And then lastly, we're going to go over the solutions. The first place I'm going to start off with is identifying what causes the most death in this country. And currently, heart disease, cancer, and COVID are the three largest contributors to death in this country. Now, why is this slide important? Because we have mitigations against these contributors to death in this country. For heart disease, what do we tell you? Eat a balanced diet, stay healthy, do these things that are going to be good for your heart, not just eating Honey Nut Cheerios. So we know what we need to do to battle against heart disease. Have a healthy diet, healthy lifestyle. You're good for heart disease. Cancer's a little harder, but we know some obvious things that are going to prevent you from getting cancer, such as not smoking, not chewing tobacco. These things that putting tobacco in your body are going to increase your risk of cancer. Being around a bunch of radiation is going to increase your risk of cancer. We have mitigations against these things. COVID-19, the third largest on this list. We're just getting out of a pandemic where we've had to wear masks, and a lot of people are actually still wearing masks all over this country. So how do you prevent the spread of COVID? You wear a mask. We know this, okay? And how did we, and this is very important, and how did we figure out how to help people to prevent these things? We looked at the largest contributor to the issue. The largest contributor to heart disease was an improper diet. The largest contributor to cancer for a lot of people, especially like lung cancer, smoking. The largest contributor to COVID-19 was it spread throughout the air. So we have to wear a mask to mask up to prevent the coronavirus from getting inside of us. So remember that. Okay, it depends on which statistic source you use. Some will say Some sources will say suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. Some will say 12th. But for right now, let's just go with 12. Okay. It's the 12th leading cause of death. And in 2020, 45,000, almost 46,000 Americans died by suicide, and there were an estimated 1.2 million suicide attempts. The rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men. In 2020, men died by suicide 4 times more than women. On average, there are 130 suicides per day. White males accounted for 70% of suicide deaths in 2020. In 2020, firearms accounted for 52% of all suicide deaths, and 93% of adults surveyed believe that suicide can be prevented. Now let's get on to some more statistics, because there is a precipitous rise in the amount of suicides that we're having in this country, and actually it's worldwide. So with that precipitous rise, that tells us there's something going on. There's something going on, and I don't think it's the issue that you think. I think everyone would immediately jump to the advent of social media. Slow down. I'm not saying that's not the key contributor, but that's not where I'm going with this presentation. Okay, so as you can see, there's been a rise. And you could also say, even though social media is still on that rise because you're trying to find a correlation, you could say social media is on that rise along with suicide. Life has been getting better for us as humans. Why are more people dying? Even though social media is here, why are more people dying by suicide? Why are more people choosing to take their life? I need you to think about that. Let's take a look at the men's suicide demographics. And this is less important in the presentation. I just have to be honest and say what the actual numbers are. So in 2020, the suicide rates were higher amongst adults ages 25 to 34 and 75 to 84. With the highest rate among adults ages 85 years or older. Younger groups have had consistently lower suicide rates than middle-aged and older adults. In 2020, adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 24 had a suicide rate of 14.24. This is per 100,000, right? So the reason why this slide isn't as important, but I have to include it, is because the highest rate of suicide is occurring by those ages 75 to 84. I'll say it right here. The target audience for this message isn't those ages 75 to 84. That is a very important demographic to focus on, but it's not the focus of this presentation, even though that they are predominantly the ones being affected. And I think that there might be something to that, but it's not the focus of this presentation. We're going to mostly focus on the demographics that I can actually affect in my personal life. And I know that's a little selfish, but that's the demographic that I think is most important, especially considering I am military, and we do have a concentration of younger people in the military. 85 years and older. It's important to focus on that, but not for this presentation. Okay, so according to the Center for Disease Control's web-based inquiry system's leading cause of death report, in 2019, suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34, and the fourth leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 35 and 44. There are 2.5 times more suicides as there are homicides in the United States. So this presentation is mostly going to be focused in on military age range. Let's take a look at it from a gender perspective. So as you can see from the chart, males are more affected by suicide than females. So this is a gender chart taken from the CDC's website. And this is a race chart taken from the CDC's website. As you can see, the American Indians, this might be another presentation in and of itself. I don't know what's going on with the American Indians. 33.4. So methods of suicide. This is also important because this could also be important for any rebuttals that there might be for this presentation. So I have to arm you with that as well. So most suicides occur by firearms, and then suffocation, and then poisoning, and then other meaning jumped off a cliff or something like that. And then here's a chart detailing how suicide affects each gender per method. Okay, so 55% of males commit suicide by firearm. It is the most used method to commit suicide by females as well. Now, here's the main part that I want to cue in on. It's the military demographics. So in the military, it's 83% male, right? And then it's 17% female. So we have a large concentration in the military of the affected population because most people in the military are white males. As you can see, 31% of the active duty members are in a racial minority, which means that 70% are white, right? And then you see 17% of members of the military are Hispanic. So at least the rest of that 14% to Black, Asian, the other minority groups. So white males are a large concentration, not within the homogenous group, as in men as a whole, but when you think about the military demographic, largely composed of white males. Okay, so the leading causes of death by age group. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24 and 25 to 34. These are the military demographics that I'm really queuing in on. And in the 35 to 44 range, it's the fourth leading cause of death. Notice the number one leading cause of death is unintentional injury. That could be anything. That could be a car accident. That could be, hurting yourself on the field of play. But suicide is very specific. That is a very specific way to die. Basically, what I'm saying is it's a problem, and it's a problem with a lot of young people. So I've already outlined the precipitous increase in suicides over the past 20 years, but here's another chart showing that increase in suicides per 100,000. Okay, so people suffer from suicidal thoughts. In fact, within my research and within my studying, I realized that suicidal thoughts is actually quite normal. Not saying that you're supposed to be suicidal, but if someone comes to you and they're feeling suicidal, they're not an anomaly. It's very normal to feel that way. So what conclusions can we make? We know males are more likely to commit suicide than females. Young people have higher rates of suicidal thoughts. I don't know what's going on with the American Indians, but someone needs to do something about that. Military is mostly composed of young males, therefore we have a concentration of the most affected population. However, the stats do not tell the full story. Okay, so the reasons for suicide cited from the CDC and the National Center for Health Statistics include mental health issues, drug use, job losses, financial stress, the normal things, the things that you always hear about. I think we're missing something though, and here's what I found on the World Health Organization's list. The inability to deal with life stresses, financial problems, relationship breakup, chronic pain, illness. Notice how I have relationships and breakup highlighted. That's probably telling you something. Let's zoom in on relationships and breakups. We need to have relationships with people, right? It's in our DNA. I wrote, humans have an innate need to build connections and bonds with others. So when we are unable to achieve that, or when those bonds break, or if the relationship doesn't meet one's needs, suicide is often seen as an option. And this theory is supported among service members with deployment history. Unit cohesion and post-deployment social support are associated with reduced levels of suicide or suicidal ideation. Let's take a look at a clinical study. So we know that military are exposed to a very unique situation, and being in the military, having the PCS and deploy and be away from your family. When I just got finished saying how important relationships and breakups are to suicide, we have that in abundance within the military. So one study implicated intimate partner problems are causing 54% of Army suicides versus 42% of civilian suicidal deaths. I didn't make it up. It's within the bibs. That means that our more likely to be affected population is actually more affected by suicide. And it's proven within clinical studies. So even with all this research, little is known about the manner in which relationship stresses lead to suicide. Isn't that crazy? Should we take it back to the first slide where I mentioned COVID-19 and heart disease and cancer? We know how to prevent those things, but little is known at how intimate partner problems or relationships cause suicide. Guys, that's the main part of this presentation. That is the part that you have to key in on, because this is where I'm building my case. Little is known about how intimate partner problems creates suicidal ideations or causes suicidal thoughts or creates suicide. Little is known. We can take guesses, we can try to extrapolate, but according to the studies, little is known so far. I will just give you some limb facts of this particular study because I'm fair. The study was composed of psychiatrically hospitalized suicidal U.S. service members and the clinical trials did not account for specific relationship issues such as severity of problems, authenticity of relationships, equity, or dissolution. Based on our newfound knowledge, because we're zeroing in on what is mostly affecting suicide in the most affected population, we can conclude that accessible and effective interventions to support individuals following the disruption of an intimate relationship merits further investigation. Like if someone just got broken up with, or they just broke up with someone, you need to check on them. You absolutely need to check on them. Strong Bonds is an example of an Army program designed to improve family and couple relationships by addressing relocations, deployments, and military lifestyle stresses.
We are trying to do with the Strong Bonds program is to incorporate or introduce soldiers to techniques and procedures that will help them improve themselves and ultimately improve their relationships with others.
But we're still missing something that's probably a really good program. I'm not in the Army, I'm in the Navy, but that is an example of how we're actually making efforts to help this cause. Here's some empirical evidence that I found, and I'm going to read this. Emil Durkheim posited that social relationships protect people against suicide. However, research and evidence shows the same protective relationships can cause suicide. So it's a two-sided coin. The sociology of suicide shows that social ties have the power to harm and protect. So basically, relationships with one another are positive and negative. They can negatively affect us and positively affect us. Duh. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to incorporate Durkheim's insights on the power of socially integrative ties with insights from social psychology, sociology of emotions, and social network theories to give clear suicide prevention tips. Now you know the association between intimate partner relationships and suicidality is grounded in empirical research that documents the influence of relationship factors on suicide. On the other hand, studies have shown that marital quality, admittedly difficult to define, is positively associated with subjective well-being, and that positive relationships influence physical health and can be psychologically protective. So I'm going to stop for a second here, because this is very important. I didn't include this in the bibs. I didn't include the statistics on this in the bibs. But men and women are actually affected quite differently from marriage. You'll notice from divorce rates that men pay 90% of alimony. Females file for divorce about 70 to 80% of the time. So men bear the worst burden from marriage. That's not the point of what I'm saying. The point of what I'm about to say is men actually benefit more from marriage. And here's what I mean. It's psychologically protective. Men are more affected by suicide. Intimate partner problems cause most of suicides. So that means if you're a man and you're having intimate partner problems, you're more likely to commit suicide. Let me say that again. If you're a man and you're having intimate partner problems, you're more likely to commit suicide. There's another side of that coin. We gotta get both sides. That means if you're a man and you're not experiencing intimate partner problems and you actually have a really healthy relationship with a partner, not only are you not committing suicide, you're much more happy. You're much more happy because the scale is extreme, right? So we got on this, so we got this middle part here where people can tend to be. And then we got outside of that. And we have men being outside of that in that suicide realm. And then you have men outside of this portion, not only in a non-suicidal realm, but in a happy, healthy relationship, they're going to benefit more psychologically from that relationship than their counterpart.
There's a new study out of the UK that finds being married has significant benefits for men, not so much for women.
No kidding. This is a newsflash?
Married men are healthier than their single counterparts. They demonstrate better brain activity.
Yeah.
Single men are more likely to skip breakfast, eat unhealthy meals on the go, work long hours, spend time drinking. Women, though, hardly benefit from getting married. Middle-aged women who have never been married had almost the same chance of developing a combination of diabetes, high blood pressure, and other health issues. So whether you're married or not, you know what? No rush with that ring.
No rush with that ring, but at the same time, Let's be honest. We love being married. If you find the right one, it's a give and a take, right?
I didn't make the stat up, guys. So, a study from Australia shows that young males were 75% more likely to report relationship breakdowns as the cause of their suicidal ideations than females. The vast majority of suicidal callers express dissatisfaction with intimate relationships. A study from 2003 reported that relationship problems and conflict with a partner was rated as the most common traumatic life event preceding a suicide attempt at 94%, outnumbering death and experience of loss and mental or physical abuse. So what that stat just means is that every caller who called, 94%, said that an intimate partner relationship is the cause of their call, along with 79% including death and experiences of loss, and then mental or physical abuse. But that number one thing was intimate partner issues. And that particular study was from 2003. You think things haven't gotten worse since 2003? Yeah. So these studies really tell us that those experiencing relationship issues should be screened for suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Suicide deserves to be treated as an epidemic based on the numbers. According to the CDC, between 1999 and 2006, the suicide rate rose by an average of 1% per year. Afterwards, from 2006 to 2017, the age-adjusted suicide rate has doubled. That is a 33% rise from 10.5 to 14 deaths per 100,000 people between 1999 and 2017. And it wasn't until 2019 that suicide was recognized as a public health responsibility rather than a mental health concern. So this training is really seeking to explain that rise in suicide in order to protect you from your vulnerability and susceptibility to it by being in those populations that are more susceptible. Here's one of the biggest studies in my findings. So a study from the National Violent Death Reporting System reviewed 2,200 cases which had valid data for sexual orientation and or coded as transgender. Basically, 2,000 of the cases were found to be non-LGBT suicides. So a study studying suicide within the LGBT community had to study 2,200 cases, and 2,000 of those cases weren't even LGBT. They had information on the sex and gender of each person, but 2,000 of them were. So during that study, they found some more information about non-LGBT suicides. 4 out of the 5 suicides reported were males, 80%. The study also confirmed uncomfortable truths about suicide. Let's hear this. This is very important. This is very important. You got to listen up to this part. In that study, most male suicides were not linked to the mental health issues. Guys, it's been preached into our brain that suicide is a mental health concern. And it is. I'm not going to sit here and cite that mental health concern is the main reason, because I'm doing this for prevention. This presentation is a preventative measure. So I'm not going to go to mental health, because I believe that saying that it's a mental health issue bogs down the issue to an item that we can't necessarily study effectively and create solutions to, because that's what mental health is like. It's like one of those things where you got to psychologically analyze and on an individual basis. I think we can do some things, okay? And I'm not discounting mental health. I'm just saying we need to figure out some actual solutions to these things, and it does not involve telling people to go see mental health. We have to be preventative about this. Suicide prevention, 93% of people surveyed said that it's preventable. We're trying to prevent it. I'm not going to use mental health as a crutch to do that, because it almost prevents us from actually figuring out how to solve the issue. And 7 in 10 who died by suicide had no history of mental health illness. Now, this is a two-way street, because they could have no history of mental illness, but they could still be suffering from mental illness. That's a two-sided street. The purpose of this, and I'm being fair, I admitted that, but the purpose of this presentation, I'm trying to spread awareness and I'm trying to prevent suicide. So I have to use tangible advice to give to someone who is not feeling suicidal already. Okay, so on to uncomfortable truths. The single most significant risk factor in suicide for men under the age of 30 is intimate partner problems. This is what we figured out from the study. Out of 80% of the 2,200 cases studied, which involved men, 62% of those cases were attributed to intimate partner relationships. So let's think about this. We have 62% of those suicide cases attributed to intimate partner problems, which means that 38% is attributed to a myriad of different things: financial problems, job loss, drugs, addictions, things like that. So that is a very significant portion of the affected population attributing their demise to a single factor. And in contrast, relationship issues in the LGBT community were more strongly linked with female suicides. So that means lesbians had more suicides than gay males. 50% more likely, actually. And here's another uncomfortable truth that you might need to be aware of. 82% of male suicides under the age of 30 died at first known attempt. This is significant because it brings into account men actually don't attempt suicide at the rate that women do. However, when a man does decide to end his life, it's gonna happen. So if a man is at that stage where he's considering taking his life and it's like a real possibility, he's toast. Females, in contrast, they attempt suicide at a larger rate than males, but they're way less successful. That tells you something about the way that suicide affects men. It affects men and it costs men much more than it does for females. So we know in interpreting this data that suicide based on known suicidality, like you could do for females because they attempt it much more often than men, however they're way less successful, this avenue of trying to figure out how to prevent suicide would be ineffective for men, because at 82%, if a guy makes the decision that he's going to commit suicide, he's toast. And then we figured out that the problem is not a lack of help for men being treated for mental illness. In fact, 1 in 6 of those males from that study were in treatment for mental illness, more than 250. So a significant number of males accessed mental health treatment, but the help provided was not enough. And this is the point that we're trying to get to. We're trying to find solutions to these issues by analyzing what the actual issue is. Like, what's the actual problem surrounding suicide? What's the number one contributing factor? And we figured it out. It's intimate relationship problems. So now we got to figure out why. Why are the stats the way that they are? So when statistics are presented, always inquire about why the facts are the way that they are. This assessment of the truth leads us to come up with solutions. And then after asking why, come up with solutions that address the problem directly. And that's what I'm doing here. So the purpose of the next portion of this training is to figure out why suicide prevention is so important, identify the main issue with suicidal deaths, and develop plans to make the most vulnerable, relevant populations less vulnerable, which means the military population, the demographic, 83% male, 17% female, mostly white males. White males in that graphic that I showed you earlier are more likely to commit suicide, right? But it's a male issue in and of itself. So we take the homogeneous group of males and we boil it down to a very unique subset group, military. Military has very distinct life stressors that play a factor in suicidal ideations. So in Australia, males account for 76% of all suicides, right around that 80% mark. And each suicide is estimated to cost the economy $6 million annually, which brings their total tally up to $13.75 billion per year. So if we compare those same numbers to the US at $6 million a head of people dying, that's over $300 billion per year. Even if we took the rate of suicide down for males to that of the female population in the US, that would save our economy $180 billion. So suicidal literacy is very important, even when you think about it from the monetary aspect of the follow the money approach. Okay, so recognition of the money saved by allotting resources more strategically tailored could be a debunking of the deficit model, which partially asserts that men commit suicide due to lack of seeking treatment. And if this was the case, and we know it isn't based off the research, then it proves systemic systems in place are more effective at actually reaching women than men. So what does that mean? That means you have to tailor your approach to men, the most affected population, in order to successfully get to them. This means you kind of have to meet men where they are, even if you take it that the deficit model basically asserting that men commit suicide because of like a lack of emotional need or lack of emotional intelligence, something like that, something along the realms of masculinity, things like that. You're told not to, you can't handle your feelings. That only shows you need to meet men where they are. So then I write, This would only support making suicide prevention more male-centric if you make the link between traditional masculinity deterring males from seeking help with suicide, right? Even if we grant them that point, that males commit suicide because of lack of emotional intelligence or some masculine trigger, then that would only support making suicide prevention more male-centric. So you lose either way. If you're right, we need to make suicide prevention more male-centric. If you're wrong, and you are, we still need to make suicide more male-centric because that's the affected population. Or at least meet men where they are. So what did the study show? The study showed that men respond positively to practical, self-directed problem-solving approaches to health promotion and suicide prevention. So the goal of a strength-based approach over a deficit-based approach, strength-based meaning applying masculine triggers to help men actually cope with suicide or preventing suicide, which is just trying to live a normal, fruitful, fulfilling life, over a deficit-based approach, which is just the lack thereof of emotional intelligence, things like that, things that men are usually vilified for, and that is why suicide prevention doesn't work as well for men. But we have to tailor that approach to meet men where they are. Solutions should teach people how to counter the impacts of situational distresses such as financial difficulties, intimate partner problems, relationship loss, job loss, and unhealthy coping mechanisms such as drug and alcohol abuse. A gender equity approach, which we've been talking about in this training, should recognize that gender is a social determinant of suicidal risk, right? We've learned that. If you are a male, you're more likely to commit suicide. So we need to promote male suicide literacy, and this training is a good start. This training is also an example of recognizing the diversity of men as not a homogenous group, which is something that I've mentioned plenty of times already in this training. I've already included military-specific concerns that lead to suicidal ideations. And by the way, the advice that I'm going to give is going to be able to help anyone worldwide. It's not just the US, anybody going through this. So, all right. Let's read off my idea of the gym. Since intimate relationship problems are the leading cause of suicide, is it safe to say that someone who could make you want to kill yourself is not worth your time? Okay. Then is it also safe to say that your dependency on a low-quality individual could be countered by either severing ties or not ending up with low-quality individuals out of choice as opposed to ending up in a situation due to scarcity of options? You see where I'm getting with this? And then is it safe to say that from a basic lens that people who work on their bodies have more options than those who don't, since this alternatively shows discipline and dedication? Now, what do I mean by this? You're going to be more attractive if you're in the gym. If you're working hard on your body, you're going to be more attractive. Your body is the thing that you can control. You couldn't control how tall you were, but you can control what your body looks like. This is one of the things that's going to give you an advantage and make you more attractive. There's a stat out there, and it's not in my bibs, but you have an 80% chance of being more attractive if you work on your body and are in the gym. And then I go on and I continue. Then is it also safe to say that going to the gym could be a preventative measure to ending up with someone who you think you deserve only because you think that they are the best that you can do? Lastly, is it safe to say that taking charge of one of the avenues you can control is a great first step towards becoming a better version of yourself? So in suicide prevention, what I'm trying to get you to do is realize that you got to become the best version of yourself. This is a suicide prevention mechanism. And why do I talk about the gym in terms of intimate partners? It's because when you look better, you have more options. And when you have more options, you don't have to settle for people of low quality individuals who are likely to make you suicidal. We don't want you to become suicidal. We want you to be with someone. If you have to be with someone, we want you to be with someone who makes you happy. If that person does not make you happy, we want you to have the ability to get rid of them, because getting rid of them out of your life is going to disallow them to be able to negatively affect you. And so we need you to be in the gym in order to have those options after having worked on your body, after feeling good, being healthy, having that as just a normal part of your healthy life. So now you have options and you don't feel stuck in relationships that can't work and won't work. And this is one of the things that could lead you to suicide. But I think a lot of people, and I'll say a lot of guys, because guys are the affected population, A lot of guys, they feel like this is the best you can do, and if I don't have this person, I'd rather die. Or if this person doesn't want me, I'd rather die. No. I don't want you to think that way. I want you to look better, feel better, so you don't have to settle for those low quality individuals. Okay, become good at your job. Is it safe to say that you should try to be good at the thing that you have to do for 40 hours a week, 200 hours a month? I'd say so. Is it safe to say that your confidence will improve when you become more competent at what you do? People tend to say that confidence is one of the key attractors, especially for the opposite sex. Then is it also safe to say that the confidence that you build will lead to you accomplishing things? I would agree with that. Then in the same breath, will you likely derive satisfaction from life through accomplishing things rather than having your main fulfillment come from someone else? And this is really important because for you to kill yourself over someone else, that person has to be super important to you. Now, we're adding an avenue in your life where instead of that person being the most important thing to you, and they can be important, accomplishing things, getting fulfillment from that is what's going to keep you alive, is what's going to keep you fulfilling your purpose. And then, is this another example of taking charge of an avenue that you can control, which would lead you to becoming the best version of yourself? So if you become really good at your job, this is something that you can control. You can put in the hours, you can put in the extra work to become good at your job, because when you become more competent, you become more confident. And when you become confident, it's going to lead to accomplishments. And those accomplishments are going to inevitably lead to a better version of yourself, which is what I am saying that suicide prevention actually is. We're going to get you to become the better version of yourself, but we're giving you practical things that you can do. I can't be practical with your specific job, but I can be practical with telling you that you need to be good at that specific job if you have to do that for 200 hours a week. And then we need you to develop some hobbies. Now, when I say develop hobbies, I'm not talking about video games unless you want to develop a hobby in video games in order to monetize it or something like that. Or, you're just hanging out with friends, and video games is a good hobby. But if it's your sole mechanism for winding down and enjoying life, then we might need to do something a little different in order to get you out and about. So is it safe to say that having hobbies can provide opportunities for social interaction, increase diversity of abilities, and lead to fulfillment outside of work? Then is it also safe to say that you can use hobbies to network with others? In the same breath, is it also safe to assume that hobbies contribute to being a more well-rounded and interesting person in general? And this is one of the other things. So we got confidence, we got being interesting. You don't want to be boring, so you have to have hobbies, right? And these things are going to make you more attractive. And remember, the first thing that I talked about is getting into the gym. Getting into the gym makes you more attractive. The confidence from your job, being a leader, these things make you more attractive. Having hobbies, these things make you more interesting, which makes you more attractive. And now low quality individuals can't enter your orbit because you won't allow them to. And even if they do enter your orbit because you're a guy, you can keep them at bay. It would take someone super close to you to be able to make you want to kill yourself, right? I would think so, usually, right? Someone super close to you. So let's keep these low quality individuals out of your life. And one of the ways to do that is you got to do these things, like developing hobbies. And is it also safe to say that people like being around interesting people? Okay, so we're getting into the socialization part of this. Well, we talked about Durkheim earlier in this. And is it also safe to say that we require social interactions due to being social creatures? Yes, we are social creatures. Self-isolation is one of the key determinants of suicidal behaviors. And finally, does this help to address possible social disconnection and social skills deficits, which are key contributors to suicidal thoughts? If you feel like you're not normal enough to be able to hang around people and interact with people on a real level where people actually kind of understand you, everyone's not going to completely understand you. The world doesn't owe you understanding, but can you actually have conversations with people and they go somewhere and you know that you're actually interacting with them on a real level where they understand what you're saying. You're not a social pariah. That's what we want. We want to create that. And you need practice in order to do that. And so developing hobbies, these social interactions are going to help you to do that. Become a SME. And this is the fourth thing. There are 5. This is the fourth thing. Become a SME, a subject matter expert. Is it safe to say that being a SME requires time and attention and focus on a subject that you've developed an interest in? Because this adds to your interest. This makes you more interesting. You develop interest in things, you are now more interesting. Then is it also safe to say that if you become a SME, you can utilize networking avenues to teach others about your expertise? Where am I going with this? Is it also safe to say that your time is valuable? Where am I going with this? And is it also safe to say that you could monetize your time to become valuable to an audience who is willing to listen to you? You see, if you become a subject matter expert in a field, such as getting a degree or talking about things on YouTube, these things make you more interesting, make you a leader in a subject. These things automatically make you more attractive. We're adding to your attractiveness level. It's funny how that works. It's funny how we need to make you more attractive in order for you to not be on the path of suicide. I don't know if that's correlated necessarily or if it's just happenstance. It's probably a little bit of both. We probably need to make you a little bit more attractive in order for you to not be suicidal. And then is it also safe to say that increasing an alternative stream of income could help with one of the main causes of suicide, financial difficulties? So becoming a SME, either at work or outside of work, something that you've developed an interest in, could put some more money in your wallet. And this is one of the key contributors to suicide, financial difficulties. So we're addressing financial difficulties too, as well as intimate partner problems. And as I already talked about earlier in this presentation, it's not clear, it's not well defined, it's not well studied how intimate partner problems affect people's suicidality, but we know it does, and we know that there's something that we can do about it. This is my hypothesis on what I think we can do about it. And then last but not least, social circles. Is it safe to say that isolation is one of the leading signs of suicide? Yes, self-isolation is a sign that someone is suicidal. Now, I know if you're by yourself right now, you're not necessarily suicidal, but when you see attempts to just stay to yourself, we might need to check on those people. Is it also safe to say that building a social circle can reinforce the notion that people like, admire, and respect you enough to maintain relationships with you? Yes, this is very important. Sometimes when people commit suicide or are thinking about committing suicide, they think that the world will be better off without them. No, the world's not going to be better off without you because you're a very unique person, right? You have unique abilities that you can offer to the marketplace, to people that family, friends like, admire, and respect you. I like to think about it this way. You beat millions and millions of sperms to be here only to take your life. That doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to me. So when you think about it from that perspective, you are very unique. You are special. You're kind of a snowflake. Not in the snowflake of the political sense talk, but snowflake as in very unique. So you are needed here. You provide something special, and we need you to keep providing that special thing. So we need you to not commit suicide. Then is it also safe to say that relationships with people is important to living a happy and productive life of abundance? Yes, absolutely. We've touched on the social aspect of life being very important to people in order for us to have a fulfilling life. We absolutely need it. You can't live happily without that. And then, last but not least, are these preventative or interventionist methods for combating suicide? These are preventative, 100%. These are not interventionist. Interventionist is where I think we often skew toward when we're thinking about dealing with the problem of suicide. I'm trying to get you before you get into that river of suicide. Interventionist methods may or may not be good for people that are already in that river of suicide where they're actually thinking about it. And I'm trying to do preventionist methods. So preventing you from even getting there. And these 5 things, going to the gym, working on your body, becoming good at your job, becoming a leader, developing hobbies, being sociable, learning those skills in order to maintain social bonds. Social bonds are very important, so it's becoming a SME, doing something outside of work, having hobbies and or things that you're interested in outside of work that could lead to more fulfillment, more accomplishments, more money in your pocket, things like that. These things are all tied together into creating a fulfilling life of abundance. And it kind of starts with really making you more attractive so that you don't have to deal with low quality individuals, because low quality individuals is what's leading people to commit suicide. Now, we've covered a lot in this training, but here's the bib. Also, the bib is in the description of the video. If you want a shorter form of this video, I can definitely shorten it since I've talked about it now. But let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your feedback. Do you think this was a good presentation? Do you think I missed something? Do you think I'm misunderstanding something about suicide? I'd love to learn more. And also, if you haven't, I spent a lot of time on this video and on this research. So if you could leave a like, it costs you nothing, and it would be a big help to actually spread this word, because one of the goals I set out to have is I want to have an impact. So I want to spread suicidal literacy, and it starts for me with a presentation like this. So like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be releasing videos about a number of different topics, military topics, finance topics, all different types of topics. So if you enjoyed listening to this, make sure you follow me. Oh, also follow me on Instagram at Ty600, TYSIXHUNNID. It's also in the description. Also, it should be on the screen right now. And don't be a ghost follower. That's lame. I need to get my followers up, so do that. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and peace.
You're the night sky trying to make me see your stars, but the dark at